Okay, let's move on to other things. We'll be checking. By the way, did you see the crowds at Three Anchors Bay yesterday? The whole Sea Point area in Cape Town. I don't know how many people. We're going to find out. But they obviously tried to sight the moon, which is the thing they do every single year, or even during Ramadan and during Eid. And of course, the moon was not sighted as was expected. But the crowds that were there were crazy. And we're going to chat to Samit Moores about that, about the reference made that this is probably unprecedented in the world. I mean, how many communities get together with that large numbers of people as families, right? To cite them as part of a great Islamic, tradition of the Western Cape in particular. So we're going to talk about that just now. Yeah, that comes up just now. Let's, however, pick up on the issue of the whole, the Pick and Pay advert, well, not advert, poster that they produced to advertise their meats right early on in Ramadan, and that's fine, that's cool, and of course they had Ramadan Mubarak, accepting on this one particular poster. I will get Rahima to hopefully post it as well now. It was Ramadan Mubarak on the same poster that they also advertised the fact that they were selling ham. Now, those of you of the Muslim faith would understand that ham, even the Jewish faith, in fact, ham and general meat consumption in Muslims and the Jewish faith is a no, no, no. So to put that on one poster, but also to wish Muslims Ramadan Mubarak was just like crazy. Of course, something I raised with them. They were very, very apologetic, but they also engaged me to say maybe we should have a conversation about some learnings. I suggested they needed to do some serious learnings around that, culture insights, right? But I did ask them to come on air, and in fact, in the last 2.5 weeks, they said no, no, no. And they said we'll talk about some other things some other time, which I think is disappointing, considering they've apologized. So we've held it back till now, and now that they're not going to talk to me, certainly during Ramadan, we thought let's try and understand, some of the lessons learned from that, and maybe advice to give to people like the Pick and Pays of the world in a society that we live in. So with me is Dr. Claudelle von Eck, who's the founder of Brave Inflexions. Claudelle, appreciate your time and good morning.
Good morning, and good morning to your listeners.
Okay, I'm just trying to get your sound right so I can hear you properly because I'm just battling to hear you out there. You certainly unmuted. That's the good news. Just tracking with Nasreen on this side whether we. No, not too sure. But I can still. Can I hear you? Just say something, Claudelle. Let's see if we can.
Hi, good morning, Ashraf. Can you hear me now?
Okay, now I'm battling to just hear Claudelle. Let's see if we can get Nasreen to sort it out. We have to probably just rejig that, right? By the way, did you see over May Day, right? Okay, we're probably going to just reconnect in just a second or two. We'll do that right away. Okay, hopefully this time around it's much better. Claudelle, you're there?
I am. Can you hear
Okay,
me?
we can certainly hear you. Okay, so thank you for your time. Most
Great.
appreciated, right? So Dr. Claudelle von Eck is the founder of Brave Inflections, and I'm going to talk to you because I want to pick your brain about some of the lessons learned from that whole Pick and Pay Ramadan Mubarak ham marketing exercise, right? I mean, you've seen the posters, right? They've apologized, but what do you make of that just on first sight?
Yeah, look, I think first of all, organizations in South Africa must realize that we live in a multicultural society. And part of our responsibilities as organizations is to understand our landscape, and not just primarily the landscape that we would want to see. And so I think an important lesson here for Pick and Pay is that it actually needs to do a little more homework, but also make sure that its people are trained. I am also sorry, like you, that they haven't come on to the show to have a conversation with you. My best guess is, though, that it is territory that they don't really understand. They put their head into something that they now have
Mm,
to backtrack out of, and a conversation where they need to explain or show up that they don't really know a lot about your religion, I think is probably the reason why.
But that also reflects I mean, a huge naivety, isn't it? What I'm saying. So
Yes.
the mistake happened, and I think we must consider. Because I even said, so it's not about me. It's just raising the issue. Once the mistake happens, like fine, let's move on. We've learned from that. They've said sorry, but in the same time, they certainly spoke to me to say we need to learn lessons. And I said, well, let's have that conversation on air, not to knock you, but to see how we can move forward. And that's the part they've refused to talk about. They've literally, as you said, that they haven't showed up, which is so from a reputation management analysis. Do you think the fact that they haven't showed up almost backtracks their apology?
I'm not sure if it completely backtracks the apology, but it does show that there isn't enough of a confidence that they can speak to the subject, but it also not enough application of mind. Because at the very least, they could have reached out within. Pick n Pay is a huge organization. It is reasonable to expect that there would be Muslims working for Pick n Pay. And at the very least, you could have reached out within your organization and found people who could have prepared you if you're not going to send somebody who is a little more au fait with the Muslim faith. So yes, it's very, very unfortunate, and I think it really is a matter of we've apologized, but we don't want to be on air exposing our ignorance.
Yeah, I think that's a disappointing part because they're a big organization, and to answer that, yes, there are many Muslims who work for them, not just at basic store level, but in senior management as well, right? Now, having said that, let's go back to the initial thing. They apologized, and I certainly take that, but it does speak to breakdowns in their systems because it's not like the Muslim faith just emerged just last week. They're not a new community in the country, right? And it does speak about what I call the need for a cultural checklist that at store level, and I understand this was done at store level, not at national level, but at store level, before they print anything and display it, they need to ensure that it passes that cultural checklist, whatever it is. I mean, it could be Christian or Jewish or Muslim or white or black, whatever. And clearly they're not doing that. What do you make of that? That means an organization, such an established institute, doesn't do that because they don't do that. And they've said so.
Yeah, I think let's just take a step back and look at human nature. And so, first of all, most humans don't really have much of a capacity unless there is awareness and they actively work on that capacity to think proactively about more than 150 people. Right? So, our thinking ability, if not developed, stays very small. So it's not something that we necessarily would be thinking about. The other thing that I would add to that is if you take Dr. Keegan's levels of consciousness or order of consciousness, there are 5 levels. Most people end up at level 3, and level 3 is really so. Level 1 is I'm only aware of my emotions, my needs. Level 2, a little more expanded, but it's still focused on me, my interests, what I want to do, what I want to achieve. Level 3 is when I now start to think about the bigger group, but it's still my group, my in group,
Mm, mm, mm.
my family, my religion, and so forth. It's only at level 4 and 5 where people start to think broader than just themselves. So at level 4, I start to use my own brain. I don't go into group think. I don't just think about X and Y because my religion thinks about X and Y. I start to question things. And at level 5, I now have a broader worldview. I have the ability to see that there are other people who may think differently than I do, that they have a different faith, they have different thoughts. And to get there is a development, it's a psychological development. Right? So, and it's also connected to, so there's a place here, the right side of your brain, which is called the temporoparietal I also need to think about this temporoparietal junction. That's what it is.
Okay. Mhm.
And that's the part of the brain that lights up when we think about others. But it's also part of the brain that needs to be developed. So if you take those three, the combination of those three things that I've put on the table, you then have a situation where people are not actively made aware and they don't engage, that when they're in a certain situation, there isn't really deep application of mind. You said store level. I would still say that Pick and Pay at head office should have a team that thinks about, right, so what is happening for the here, all the different faiths, and it's not just about faith, because there are other groupings as well. Uh, and how are we going to deal with those? And then make sure that it filters down right through to the ground. In all likelihood, what you may have found in that particular situation is that it is somebody who may not be as literate in when it comes to the understanding of different cultures and so forth. But you do need somebody to be a champion
Mm,
and make sure that it's pushed through, and that awareness is constantly there, so that we
yeah.
then can get people to a state where they do what they need to do
And I mean, I
properly.
think you're right, and it's certainly not just about faith. I mean, it's about faith, it's about culture, it's about race. It's about other orientations. So, for example, I'm thinking about the H&M. I think it was an advert where they were promoting, and even clothing, where they're promoting things that they suggest, and they had
Yes.
these black kids in sort of as the monkeys, and there was this huge uproar in South Africa. But the consequence of that, besides those that trashed the stores, was, I think, the ad agency Avatar then was asked, the South African agency was asked to input into their cultural norms worldwide, because they felt there was a drastic or dramatic need to understand that. So, I mean, I think that's the example. But it does also tell you that when these global companies, it's good that they want to use others to give them insights, but it does surprise you that they don't have them already. I mean, it's the most basic thing in a world that has moved so far away from, Europe is the paradigm, isn't it?
Yeah, no, that's true, but it's once again coming back to human nature. If I haven't felt the pain of being discriminated against, what is going to increase my awareness? And I think we need to also acknowledge that those of us who are minority groups or whatever it may be, women, for example, is that the level of empathy that a person is able to display towards us has a lot to do with their ability to identify with our pain. And to if they haven't experienced it, it takes a little more work. So there also needs to, just as much as we're expecting that these people must wake up, we are in the 21st century, why are we
Mm,
still
mm.
having this conversation? Perhaps also proactively think about how do we increase awareness. So if I were to give advice to the Muslim community, for example, I would say that where your people are in organizations, perhaps mobilize people to start asking questions, asking more questions of the organizations that they work for, and push from within. Is it fair to ask those who are feeling the pain to have to do extra work? No, it's not fair. But it is also about understanding what it is that we're working with. And if we want to change the world and create greater awareness, we shouldn't just be reactive when we see things happen, but we know that in South Africa, for example, the vast majority of people are Christian and they don't think about other religions. They just generally don't, because
Yeah,
then there's very little interaction. So if you go to the Western Cape, there would be more awareness. If
yeah.
you're sitting in Johannesburg, there will be less awareness. How do we then also contribute to increasing the awareness?
Absolutely. Keeping in mind that certainly South Africa constitutionally is very on side in terms of opening up
Mm.
spaces for all faiths, and I think that is a unique South African thing which we need to be very very proud of. Now, interestingly enough, one of the comments. So yes, when this whole Pick and Pay thing was discussed initially, for those that wanted an apology, I mean, some people were downright angry and like really bitter, which I felt like, no, I said this is obviously a mistake, but it needs to be
Mm.
corrected. But there was another grouping of people who felt that, you see, they are just being opportunistic in the first place because they want to promote their wares during Ramadan because they want to tap on the Muslim market, and they must like literally keep in their lanes, which I find is rather strange. I mean, aren't we happy that mainstream supermarkets value the fact that there is an existing community, and again, today it's Muslim, tomorrow it's something else, and then we need to also deliver to that market.
Mm. Look, I think generally human beings try to be good people, even though the level of consciousness may not be where they are completely able to deliver on that good peopleness that they want to portray. Um, so it's very difficult to determine whether this was really just a gesture out of the heart of somebody who thought, I want to be a good person, I want to show Muslims that I care, or that we think about them, or whether it really was just opportunistic, you know. So I think that it's difficult to say what it is, but
Mm,
yes, it is for me ultimately about continuously increasing the awareness so
yeah,
that we
yeah,
can get to a point where people understand what does it mean when this happens, when a Muslim looks at this. If I were in that person's shoes, how would I feel if I saw that? That is
yeah.
where empathy then comes in.
That's a good point. Now, here's the last thing, right? So picking up what I said earlier on, in the past, in the past, historically, apartheid South Africa, most of the supermarkets and the big businesses, they totally ignored all communities that were not Christian. That's what happened in the past. In the last 20 years or so, there's been acceptance in terms of wishing people well over Ramadan or Yom Kippur or Rosh Hashanah or Diwali. So there's this acceptance of minority faiths, right, and acknowledging them by greetings outside their stores. But what's happened now, and an interesting one outside the Pick and Pay example, is like CNA I was in Central City on Saturday. They had like 3-4 tables of, let's call it, Muslim Eid things, about the books that people buy, the toys that you give to your children, different things, Muslim heroes, all of that linked to Ramadan and Eid. Now, again, the critic will say, well, again, they're being opportunistic. I'm actually saying, hold it. If you want to understand your faith and ensure that it's mainstream, then you can't have it any other way. You can't leave that
Yeah.
to have only Muslim-owned stores catering for that. You actually want it to become the most normal thing in the world. So for me, it's like a thumbs up to say, well, this is a great example of minority communities and the way they do things and the things they require being normalized by being part and parcel of mainstream communities and mainstream businesses in this case. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think that quite right, you said it. You can't have your cake and eat it. But secondly, I also think that we need to be very careful that we don't, because people are in the same group, doesn't, in terms of the label that you put on in the group, doesn't necessarily mean that everybody experience the faith or the what it is that they would like to see exactly the same way. Um, in Islam, as it is in Christianity, as it is in Judaism, you have groupings and people interpret scriptures differently and so forth. So one has to, I suppose, almost allow for the fact that there will be some disagreements within the faith. You're not going to have a uniform view around these things. But ultimately, yes, I would agree with you that just objectively looking at it from any faith perspective, if it is mainstream, there is greater awareness. If there's greater awareness, then it goes into the workplace, it goes into the culture of the broader society to look through the lens of a minority that we generally would not even think about because it doesn't feature in our lives. But the more people who are able to look through that lens, ultimately, then I think it is better for that group. But you said it, you can't have your cake and eat it.
Absolutely. There's greater awareness. There's also greater empathy and just greater understanding of each other as human beings. Well, Dr. Claudelle von Eck, thank you for your time. Really fascinating talking to you, and appreciate your insights around the whole Pick and Pay issue and beyond that, of course. Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Here we are. Dr. Claudelle von Eck was the founder of Brave Inflexions. Yeah, you can't have your cake and eat it. So think about. I'm just thinking about this one here. You know, when we went to the wondrous cricket ground, for example, in the past, I mean, you know, Muslims pray 5 times a day. So you're watching the cricket match. There's a good chance you would have the Dhuhr prayer and the Asr prayer, maybe even the Maghrib. Then you don't want to miss that. And then when things became normalized, they created these prayer facilities at the stadiums. The same thing with shopping centers. Same thing with the airports, right? So again, if you want that, which is great, which recognizes your rights, then accept the fact they will also sell you goods as well. And you can't say, well, you can't do that. Only I can sell the goods, because then you bring yourself back into a lager situation, which is very apartheid thinking, as opposed to saying, open the spaces for each one of us, and we can follow that, which is what we want to follow. Right, talking about spaces, the spaces out at Three Anchors Bay last night, fascinating. They were filled up by people looking for something that they knew there was a very small chance they were going to find. The crescent moon for the month of Shawwal, marking the end of Ramadan and the beginning of Eid. We're going to try and make sense of the historical aspect of that in a moment.